Hello everyone, welcome to EduTap. So today we have the third class of our ongoing Costing Foundation series through the help of MCQs for SEBI Grade A officer. Right. So in the first class, what we did, we discussed all the important concepts related to the introduction to cost and management accounting. Right. And in the second class, what we did in the first class, apart from this introduction to cost management accounting, we also discussed concept related to the material costing, and we actually applied those concepts in the form of MCQs, right? And in the second class, what we did, we discussed about the important concept of employee costing, isn't it? We also call it labor costing. And with that, we also discussed about the overhead costing, how to distribute this overhead, how to apportion or how to allocate these overhead. And we also discussed about the absorption of this overhead, right? And we did see the differences between these 3 or 4 terms, right? That is absorption, apportionment, reapportionment, allocation, right? So in the second class we did this. Now in this particular class, what we are going to understand, we are going to understand the concepts related to the activity based costing, and as well as the concept related to the unit costing, right? And the pattern will be same as earlier. First of all, we are going to look at the question, we are going to understand the question, then we are going to understand the underlying concept of that question, then we are going to attempt the same question again. The first question we have is an approach in which company under cost its one product and over cost at least one product is classified as what? See, to do this question, you need to understand two approach of costing. First one is your traditional, or we call it absorption costing, right? And another technique, or you can say another approach of costing is activity based costing. Now, see, these are very important concept of costing. So we need to understand this in a very comprehensive way, and we are going to understand these two concepts with the help of examples, so to have a better clarity on these two concepts, right? This is the base of ABC of activity based costing, right? Now, what do we have in the example? Please listen to me very carefully in this particular slide and in the next slide, because this will form your base with regard to the activity based costing, and as well as with regard to the absorption costing, right? Suppose first we are going to discuss about the traditional or absorption costing. So suppose we have 3 products in a company, in a manufacturing company ABC. So as we all know, the direct material is given to us per unit, direct labor is also given to us, and apart from direct material and direct labor, what do we have? We have overheads, right? Now this overhead is 27 lakh in this example total. This 27 lakh overhead constitute 2 department cost. First one is X and another one is Y, that is 12 lakh and 15 lakh respectively. Now this department X is a labor intensive department, and this department Y is a machine intensive department. So now what happens when you distribute this overhead to the product cost? Please listen to me very carefully, huh? This is important. When you distribute this 27 lakh to the product, what is the base, or you can say what is the factor behind it? The factor behind this apportionment or distribution of this cost to the product is your overhead rate, absorption overhead rate, or we call it overhead absorption rate. And this is going to be dependent upon, this rate is going to be dependent upon the labor hour or machine hour or any factor that is given in the question, right? Now in this question, this department X cost would be dependent upon the labor hours, or I can say that overhead absorption rate. This overhead will be absorbed by the unit of goods, na? So that will be absorbed by the unit of goods by the by using the labor hours, right? So how you are going to find out the rate? How you are going to find out the rate? Rate means rupees per labor hour for this department X. So overhead cost is 12 lakh for department X, and this is labor intensive, so you are going to define the rate on the basis of labor hour used in this department, that is 2 lakh rupees, right? So your rate, overhead rate is rupees 6 per labor hour, right? Now this rupees 6 per labor hour is going to be used to absorb this 12 lakh cost in the product A, B, C, depending upon how much product they are manufacturing. So this 6 rupees per labor hour is distributed equally A, B, C in equal products A, B, C. Now we have department Y. This department Y is a capital intensive department. Now this 15 lakh overhead cost would be divided by the machine hour to obtain overhead absorption rate of this department, and that would be rupees 3 per machine hour. Now let's try to understand how this is going to be absorbed by the units of A, B, C. Till now you are clear that rupees 6 per labor hour is equal for A, B and C. For all the goods A, B, C, rupees 6 per labor hour will be the defining criteria or will be the absorption rate for department X, right? Now we have the statement of cost. You know that material is directly given to you per unit, that is okay, that is 50, 40 and 32. Now you have direct wages given to you directly, that is 30, 40 and 48, easy enough. Now comes the overhead part. So for overhead we have different department. So see, we are using traditional method right now. We are using absorption method, right? Absorption approach to absorb the overhead into the goods cost, right? So department X, this department X, we are absorbing the cost of department X. Now for unit A, as you can see, the per unit they are taking 3 labor hours. Per unit they are taking 3 labor hours. As you all know, we are finding out cost per unit. So for a single unit, the product A is using 3 hours, and we have the recovery rate of 6 rupees per labor hour. So we have to multiply it to find out the cost of each unit in terms of for the overheads, right? So for product A we have the rupees 18. For product B we would have 4 into 6 because B is taking 4 labor hours and the labor hour recovery rate is rupees 6 per labor hour. So rupees 6 into 4 hours, we have the per unit cost, overhead cost per unit for the department X is 24, and similarly we will find it out for the product Z, that is 5 into 6, 30 rupees. Now we have to find out the department Y cost and how it is going to be absorbed by the A, B, C units, right? So we would use the same pattern or same technique. For A, it is using machine hour, 4 hour it is using for a single unit, right? And for a single machine hour the cost is rupees 3. So for per unit cost would be 4 into 3, and similarly for B it is 4 into 3, and similarly for Z it is rupees 7 into 3. Now we have the per unit cost for A, B and Z, right? Then you are going to add them, so you will have the per unit cost for A, B and Z as well. Now this is the traditional method. In this, what is happening? What is happening here? The 6 labor hour is constant for A, B and C. Now suppose I say to you that this 27 lakh overhead cost consists of different activities. Sir, activity mean suppose it consists of inspection cost, it consists of setup cost, and let's suppose this A product uses less inspection cost, and simultaneously this Z uses more inspection cost. So can you say this absorption or traditional method would be right here to apply? Because see, according to the activity involved, the cost will be increased or decreased for a particular good. But in this case, in the traditional method, what we did, we just did rupees 6 per labor hour and we distributed it in A, B and C depending upon the number of units it is making. But if suppose the A is using very less activity of inspection, let's say, you can see here, the number of machine setups, it is using only 120, and as far as Z is concerned, it is using 150 machine setups. So Z is using more activity of machine setups, and this overhead cost also includes machine setup cost. So the cost should be not equally divided between these two. Cost should be divided between these three products based on the activity they are using. So this is what activity based costing is. I know now you have only understood 30 to 40% of what is this activity based costing. We are going to understand this 100% till 100% with the help of this example. Don't worry about that. I know only a rough idea you have got till now, but as soon as this example is finished, you will have a better clarity on this topic, because this is a very important and a very complex topic as well, right? So please listen to me very carefully till the end of this this concept, right? Now let's suppose now we are going to find out this product cost based on activity based costing, right? Now we have receiving and inspection cost of this 27 lakh. We have a component of receiving and inspection cost of 14 lakh. Now this is an activity, and production and setup cost of rupees 13 lakh, and total we have the 27 lakh as we know. Now as you can see, the number of purchase requisition used by the A is 600, and for B it is 900, and for Z it is maximum, that is 1000, right? And for machine setup it is 120 for A and 130 for B, and for Z it is 150. Now see, and number of batches received is overall 2500, and it is for setup or scheduling it is 400, right? Now in the activity based costing, you are going to find out the cost driver rate. What is this cost driver, sir? I'm going to tell you, don't worry. See, activity has a cost. Why? Because of cost driver. Cost driver is something that is causing cost to go up. It is the reason why the activity has a cost. Suppose number of batches are more, right? If number of batches are more, then obviously the inspection cost will be higher. So this number of batch is the cost driver. Are you getting this point? If the number of batches for setup is more, then obviously the production setup cost will be more. So number of batches for setup is the cost driver of this activity. Are you getting this thing? Can you visualize this thing? Right? So number of batches inspected is more, then obviously the inspection cost will be more. And if the number of batches for the setup is more, obviously the production setup cost will be more. So this is the cost driver. These are the cost driver, number of batches. So we have to find out the cost driver rate. Now we are finding out the driver rate based on the activity involved, or based on the reason behind those costs, right? So overhead cost of the activity we will take in the absorption cost. In the absorption costing, we were not using activity. So in the activity based costing, we are going to use the activity cost. So activity cost is 14 lakh, and the cost driver is what? 2500. So you are going to divide it by 2500. So you will have the cost of rupees 560 per batch. And similarly for scheduling and setup cost, you will have a cost of 3250 per setup cost. Now this is activity based costing. Now let's try to find out the cost per unit. Okay, so direct material, direct wages will be same. Now we have the overhead costing, and that will be divided between the two activities: overhead receiving or inspected costing, or we have the setup costing, right? Now please listen to me very carefully. You have the inspection costing of rupees 560 per batch, and the number of purchase requisition is 600 for A. So you need to calculate the overall cost for the A, because it is using 600 batches for inspection. So overall cost for product A will be 600 multiplied by the driver rate, that is 560. So overall cost will be 560 into 600. But for a statement of cost, you need to find out the cost of 1 unit. So you are going to divide by the number of units, that is 10,000. So you will have your per unit cost for the product A for the inspection cost, that is 33.60. Similarly, you are going to do it for product B. 560 would be same. Total purchase acquisition is 900. You are going to multiply it with 900. Then you are going to divide it by 20,000. So you would have 25.20, right? And for product C, we are going to have 18.67 rupees per unit overhead cost for the inspection cost. Now for the second activity, we are going to do it with the same method, 3250 per setup. And what do we have? Number of batches for setups. For A it is 120. So we are going to multiply it with 120, right? And we are going to multiply it with 3250 to have a total cost for product A as far as this setup cost is concerned. And then we are going to divide it with 10,000 because you have to calculate 1 unit setup cost. So we have this 39 and we have 21 for B, and for C we have 16.25. Then you are going to add it. So C, as you can see, it is 152, for B it is 126 approximately, and for Z it is 114 approximately. Now can you see the difference here? Please see here very carefully. In the traditional method, the product cost for A was coming out to be 110, for B it is 116, for Z it is 131. But as far as ABC method is concerned, the cost per unit for A is 152, B is 126, and Z is 114. Which is more logical according to you? It is ABC, because it is using activity based drivers. The drivers that are causing the cost to go up, they are distributing the cost according to that. But in the absorption costing, all are getting divided or distributed equally. So this is the way to find out the cost per unit more logically, this activity based costing, right? So in a big firm, ABC costing method is generally used, right? Now can you see, this is 110, but and actually it should have been the 152.60 according to ABC costing. But suppose firm doesn't use ABC and it uses traditional method, then if we add the profit margin into this 110, the selling price could have been approximately 120, 130, right? It could have been this, but this is wrong because the actual cost is 152.60. So the actual selling price by adding profit margin to this cost could have been, or should have been, I can say 160 to 170 or 180, right? So as you can see, the product A cost per unit is less, but Z cost per unit is more in the case of traditional method. But as far as ABC method is concerned, the ABC costing, A is more and Z cost is less. So what is happening here? So you are compensating this less cost by increasing the cost of Z. This is called cross product cost subsidizing, because see, it is 110 but it is 131, but actually it should have been 152 and this should have been less, right? So it is what we call cross subsidizing of cost, right? So this was the first concept that we were using, and this is the only concept. ABC, that is activity based costing, has only this much concept, that what is a activity based costing and what is the absorption based costing, and what is the difference between these two. So I can say that we have overall completed the activity based costing concepts, all the concept, right? So the first question says, an approach in which a company undercosts its one product. As we can see, they have undercost its one product and overcost one or more product to compensate with this thing, right? So it is called what? Service cost across subsidizing, no. Product price, no. Product cost, because it is under costing, right? So product cost cross subsidizing. So option number C is the correct answer here, right? So I hope you have got this. If you haven't, please watch this 2 times, please watch this 3 times, but you need to have an understanding of this activity based costing and as well as the concept related to the absorption costing, right? So the second question we have is, costing system in which individual activities are identified as cost object is considered as what? तो अब ये क्वेश्चन आप लोगों के लिए आसान होगा क्योंकि हम ABC जो एक्टिविटी बेस्ड कॉस्टिंग है उसकी अंडरस्टैंडिंग ले चुके हैं. तो इस क्वेश्चन में क्या लिखा हुआ है? इन विच इंडिविजुअल एक्टिविटीज आर आइडेंटिफाइड एज कॉस्ट ऑब्जेक्ट. तो अगर एक्टिविटीज की टर्म है, सो आंसर शुड बी योर एक्टिविटी बेस्ड कॉस्टिंग, राइट? सो we know what is activity based costing. Now what is this marginal costing? Let's understand this concept as well very briefly, because this is a separate chapter in costing, so we are going to go into depth of this topic in another video, but for now let's have a brief discussion on this. See, marginal costing is that type of costing which is used when you have to see the impact of variable cost on the total volume or on the profit itself. So this is what marginal costing. In the marginal costing, we consider only the variable cost, right, to be impactful on the overall volume or impact on the profit, Right? Please remember this, marginal costing only considers variable cost as the product cost. Please remember this thing, because in the absorption costing now, variable costing as well as fixed cost is considered as product cost. But in the marginal costing, only this question can be asked directly, that in which type of costing variable cost is only considered to be as product cost. Right? Please remember this. And what is the standard costing? Standard costing is very easy. You have a predetermined limit, and then you are going to compare it with actual cost, and then you are going to control your cost as per the set standard. This is what standard costing is. Easy enough. Now what is this lean costing? Let's talk about the lean costing. See, lean costing is nothing but it is used to minimize the waste to optimize the productivity. So it is a technique to minimize the waste, right? So we have the question and we have the answer. Option number B as the answer of this question, that is activity based costing, right? So the third question we have is a costing approach that uses broad averages for charging overhead uniformly. So we have basically two approaches to charge overhead, right? First one we discussed is absorption, and another one we discussed is activity based costing. So it says that broad averages for charging overhead uniformly. Okay, so we charge uniformly in what? Absorption costing or activity based costing? In activity based costing, we charge as per the activities involved in a particular product. That is more logical. But when we charge uniformly over products or services, that is known as absorption costing, right? So let's read out the options. Indirect costing, no. Cost smoothing, peanut butter costing, these are the names of absorption costing. So your answer would be both option B and C. Okay, very good. सबको समझ में आ गया है ना? Absorption costing and as well as the activity based costing. These are the two important concepts of costing, right? You need to understand these two concepts very thoroughly. So please revisit this video 2 times, 3 times, right? Now we have answer of this question as both B and C. We discussed this thing. Now we have the fourth question as which among the following statement is correct about the activity based costing? Traditional overhead costing supersedes. No, not at all. Activity based costing supersedes. Activity based costing and traditional overhead costing are no replacement for each other. This is incorrect because they are replaced. One is replacement of other. Activity based costing is an alternative to traditional based costing. It is more appropriate than the second statement. Why I'm saying this? See, in the second statement it is saying activity based costing supersedes traditional overhead costing. It might be correct, but here the more appropriate answer is this, because see, activity based costing has emerged as the alternative to traditional based overhead costing, because in a small firm now still in the small firm they uses traditional overhead costing, or we call it absorption costing approach, right? Because they are small in nature, they are not very complex, right? So it is not that activity based costing has superseded the traditional. No, it is an alternate. It is a better alternate to the traditional overhead costing. Still, some firms use traditional overhead costing and other used activity based costing, right? So we got this answer as option number D. Activity based costing is an alternative to traditional overhead costing, right? Now question number 5 says which of the following statement are incorrect? We have to tell which statement is incorrect. A factor that causes a change in the cost of an activity is known as an activity. Not at all. A factor that is causing a change in the cost of an activity, we just discussed. What is this? This is a cost driver, right? A driver is a factor which causes a change in the cost of the activity. Either it increases it or decreases it, right? So this is what cost driver is. This is not an activity. Cost driver affects the cost of the activity, right? So this statement is incorrect. Second question says group of accounts serving to express the cost of goods and services allocatable within a business or manufacturing organization is known as resource. No, this is also incorrect, because see, it is the activity which expresses the cost of goods and services allocatable. We also call it pool. We are going to understand it, don't worry about that. First, let's look at the third option. Cost object is an item for which cost measurement is required. This is correct because we have studied this in the previous class as well. That cost object is any item for which separate cost measurement is required. So this is correct. Option number 1 and 2 are incorrect, but you might be confused in the second option that what it is talking about. So we will have a concept clarity for the second option, right? So second option basically includes the steps in the activity based costing. Okay, so now you have another chance to understand the activity based costing in depth. See, we have the overhead cost, right? And you know that overhead includes various activities cost. So you have now distributed these overhead cost in activity pools. Certain activity have been the certain activity, let's say A, is occurring this much cost. So you have segregated this from this. This is cost pool B, that is activity B. So this is activity cost pool. So you have divided the overhead cost into certain activities groups and their cost. This is what we call cost pool. So the second option is talking about cost pool, right? Now let's understand further how this activity based costing works. So first step is to divide the overhead cost into activities cost. Now we need to find what activity cost driver rate. Remember the example we did? Now you can connect this example with this step. So we have divided into activities. Now we are going to decide what is cost driver rate for this particular pool or for this particular activity, depending upon the logical factor that drives the cost of this activity, right? So what is the cost driver rate A? What is the cost driver rate B? Then we are going to basically allocate it to the product, right? So these are the steps involved in the activity based costing. So now you understand that the second option is also incorrect, first option is incorrect, third option is correct, and the question is asking about incorrect. So first and 2, that is option number A is correct. Yes, option number A is absolutely correct. Now comes the sixth question. Which of the following is not an advantage of the activity based costing? So first option says more accurate costing of products and services. This is an advantage, right? And it is asking about not an advantage. Second option says overhead allocation is done on logical basis. Yes, absolutely correct. It enables better pricing policies by supplying accurate cost information. It is also correct. It is helpful to organization with multiple product. Yes, because multiple product may require different amount of activities, right, or different degree of activity they are using. So cost will be dependent on how much activity they are using, right? So it is helpful to organization with multiple products. It is not helpful to small organization. It is this is not an advantage, this is a disadvantage, right? So obviously the option number E is correct because it is talking about the disadvantage, right? ओके, तो सबने सही किया. आई होप किसी का गलत नहीं हुआ, क्योंकि एक बार एक्टिविटी बेस्ड कॉस्टिंग समझ में आ गई तो क्या ही है, फिर नहीं आया तो दोबारा देखना है एग्जाम्पल भी, और इसके पहले एक क्वेश्चन जो हमने पढ़ा था स्टेप्स वाला, दैट ऑल्सो यू नीड टू रिविजिट अगेन, राइट? वंस concept is clear, it will be easy for you to do any question based on these concepts, right? In activity based costing, costs are accumulated. Costs are accumulated by using what? By activity using what? We studied this by using cost pools. By activity using cost pools, right? Cost pools are the pools of cost for a particular activity. Remember? Okay. So option number C is the correct answer here. Question number 8 says a cost driver. Very, very easy, isn't it? Now you know what is cost driver. That causes a change in the cost of an activity, right? Is a force behind the overhead cost. बिल्कुल है, सही है. Is an allocation base. It could be an allocation base, right? Because it determines the cost of the activity. Is a transaction that is significant determination of cost. Exactly. This is also correct. So your option number D should be the correct answer. All of the above is the correct answer. सारे बच्चों ने सही जवाब दिया है. Very nice. Now we have the 9th question. Steps in ABC, that is activity based costing, include what? We have studied the steps in ABC. Identification of activities and their respective cost. Absolutely correct. Identification of cost driver, which is causing the cost of this activity to go up or down. So that is identification of cost driver and computation of an allocation rate per activity. This is also absolutely correct. Then this rate will be absorbed by the product. Allocation of overhead cost to product and services, absolutely correct, based on the activities involved, right? The example we saw and the steps we saw. So option number D is the correct answer here, all of the above, right? Now the 10th question we have is, in dash method of costing, costs are ascertained per unit of a single product in a continuous manufacturing activity. Oh, this is something different. See, I have told you in the previous two classes, or in our first class I guess, there are two things. One is methods of costing, then we have the techniques of costing. I told you and we discussed this thing that methods of costing depends upon the nature of industry, right? Like we have the unit costing, like we have the process costing, like we have the job costing, like we have the contract costing. So methods of costing are which are dependent upon the nature of industry we are costing for. Did you get this right? But techniques are something different. Techniques do not depend upon the nature of industry. So here we are talking about the method. So which method of costing? See, it is written as method of costing are ascertained per unit of single product in a continuous manufacturing activity. So for this we need to understand all the concept of these unit costing, process costing, output costing, right? So let's discuss this one by one and you will have a better idea of what should be the answer of this question, right? So let us start with unit or output costing. See, it is very easy, right? Unit costing is a method of costing that is going to be applied in industry where the identical products are to be manufactured, where standards and identical products are to be manufactured, like bricks, like bottles, similar bottles. So where the products are identical and they are in continuous mode, they are being manufactured continuously, there we are going to use unit or output costing, right? Bricks works, cement industries, dairies, steel mills, right? And sugar mills, paper mills, etc. Now, production consists of what? Single product or a few varieties of the same product with variation in size, shape, and quality, etc. But they are in continuous mode. Product is uniform, or we can say production is uniform. This is very important, and on the continuous basis, right? Now let's talk about process costing. In which type of industry this process costing is used? Process costing is used now where the product is going through different processes. Like chemical industry, we have first it goes through first process, then it goes through second process, then it goes through third process. So where the product is going through several or many processes, that is where we use process costing, right? Now let's talk about the batch costing. Whenever you hear a word batch costing, just visualize tires. Tires are produced in batches because they have a fixed shape of a particular variety. They have fixed shape. For small car, for let's say Maruti small cars, we have fixed size of the radius of the tires. Then we have the SUVs of Maruti. For that also we have fixed size of tires. And MRF is the contractor which supplies the, let's suppose I'm giving you an hypothetical example, don't take it very seriously, right? So MRF, let's say, supplies tires to this Maruti company. So it makes a certain size of tire in batches, right? Let's suppose, or we can say a pen, a similar type of ball pen is produced in batches. So whenever a batch costing is there, that means that is a group of similar product or identical product. That is what we meant by batches. And in this type of industry, we use batch costing. Is it clear? Okay. Now, what is the job costing? See, job costing is used where there is a customizable product. It depends on the customer's demand, such as interior decoration, photo albums, marriage projects, wedding projects of videography. That is something customizable. So this is where we use job costing. Okay. Now let's again come to the question and what this question says. Let's try to understand this. Dash method of costing are ascertained per unit of a single product in a continuous manufacturing activity. So it is written as continuous manufacturing activity. That means option number A is your correct answer. Okay. Now we have the 11th question as, which of the following statement are correct? Cost sheet is a periodical statement of cost. Now for this question, to attempt this question, you need to understand what is cost sheet. And see, cost sheet is a very important topic in the costing. You need to have an understanding of the cost sheet because it is the very primary thing in the costing. Because the primary purpose of the costing is to find the total costs for a product and to find out the cost per unit of that product, isn't it? So that would be found out with the help of cost sheet only. So you need to understand what is cost sheet. So let's discuss cost sheet, then we are going to get into the question. Okay. So cost sheet is basically the cost statement used to ascertain the cost. This is the comprehensive view of cost sheet, in which first we write the direct material, total cost as well, and per unit cost as well. Then we write direct labor, and we know what is direct and indirect labor, right? Isn't it? We have discussed this in previous 2 classes. Please go through it if you don't remember it. And then we have the direct expenses. These 3 components make your prime cost. This is very important to understand. Please remember this, that direct labor, direct material, and direct expenses make up to form the prime cost. Now we have the factory overhead, or we also call it works overhead. When we add this works overhead or factory overhead, I'll write it here, factory overhead or works overhead. And when we add this into the prime cost, we get our works cost. This is very important, right? Now, after works cost, we have office and administrative overheads related to the production. This is very confusing. Few accountant still don't know that this office and administrative overhead is not related to the selling and distribution part or related to the general administrative part. It is only related to the production. This heading is talking only about the production administrative overheads, right? For example, the salary of the supervisor can come here, but salary of an accountant is not going to come here. It is going to come here. It is half written. It should be general selling and distribution overhead. This heading should be general selling and distribution overhead. So salary of director would be here, right? And salary of accountant would be here. Salary commission, sales commission paid to the agent is included here in the third point, selling and distribution overhead, right? And in this particular point, we would have office and administrative overhead only related to the production. This is very important. I'm again saying you, because this is confusing for all the students. They get confused between this point and this point. See, obviously it is written as cost of production, na? When you add works cost to the office and administrative overheads related to the production, then you get cost of production, and cost of production cannot include your salary of directors and salary of accountant. Please remember this, because this cost of production, we also call it cost of goods sold, COGS, right? So in a way you can say this cost of production is also a works cost in a way, because it is somewhat related to the production part itself, right? So please remember this point, that we have prime cost, we have works cost, we have cost of production, and we have cost of sale at the last. Then we add profit to it. Then we have our sale price and sale price per unit as well, right? Now this is the basically comprehensive view. That was the condensed view. This was the condensed view. Now this is the comprehensive view. See what I have taught you here. It is written here. You know that direct material consumed, direct employee cost, and direct expense form prime cost. Till this, you know that prime cost is, we have got the prime cost here. Now you need to add factory overhead. See, factory overhead is written here. Whatever overheads are related to factory, that is being added here. Then you get gross works cost. Then please remember here, you add opening work in progress. Opening work in progress, and you deduct closing work in progress. Then you get your net factory cost or works cost. But after this, here is a point here. Please see this point very, very carefully. Administrative overhead related to the production activity. That is where most of the students, even the commerce background student, gets confused here. They think that this administrative overhead is related to the office administration or general administration. It is not related to the general administration. This administrative overhead which you have added to the factory cost to get your cost of production or COGS is related to production only. This is very, very important. Then you add packing cost, that is primary packing cost. It is also included in the factory overhead, right? So you get cost of production. So this is cost of production. In a way, it is basically a works cost itself, in a way, because after getting the factory cost or works cost, you have only added certain components, and in that also only important one is this administrative overhead relating to the production, right? So this packing can also be added here also, right? That is factory overhead. So the main criteria that you need to remember is prime cost. Then you need to remember you have the factory cost. Then when you add administrative overhead related to the production, then you get this cost of goods sold or cost of production. Then after that, you see this is cost of goods sold. This is also almost equal, but you just have to add this finished goods opening stock, and when you minus it from the closing stock of finished good, you get cost of goods sold. Therefore, I have told you that this is cost of goods sold, because you just have to minus this thing. These adjustment, these are obviously not asked in the question, but I am giving you comprehensive view. Therefore, I am telling you the minute details. But simultaneously, I am also telling you what is the logic behind every component and how would you remember it. You just remember it like this: prime cost, works cost, not gross works cost. Just remember prime cost. Then you add factory overhead, you get what? Works cost. Then you add this administrative overhead related to the production, then you get cost of production. And cost of production and cost of goods sold are almost equal. The difference is only that when you add opening stock and you deduct closing stock, then you get cost of goods sold, right? Then this is also very important. Now you add administrative overhead, that are general overhead, salary of accountant, salary of auditor, salary of director. Here it is added. But often students commit mistake here by adding them here. That's why I have emphasized in this 12th point that it is related to the production only, right? So salary of director, salary of auditor will be added in the 19th point. After cost of goods sold is identified, then you will add administrative overhead, then you will add selling overhead, and you will add distribution overhead. Then you will have your cost of sales. Easy enough, right? Now let's come to the question again, which says which of the following statements are correct. So now we have a good idea about what is cost sheet and how we calculate total cost and how we calculate per unit cost, right? Now the first option says cost sheet is a periodical statement of cost. Absolutely correct, because it is prepared periodically. Cost sheet reveals only total cost. No, not at all. It gives you per unit cost as well. Okay, third option says cost sheet discloses the breakup of total cost into different element of cost. Obviously prime cost, works cost, then cost of production, then we have the cost of goods sold, then we have the cost of sales, isn't it? So it gives you element wise cost as well. So the correct option is 1 and 3. Absolutely correct. सारे बच्चों ने सही जवाब दिया है. Now we have the following information is provided for the 12th to 14th question. We have a numerical for that. Okay, this numerical is very easy because now you know how to prepare the cost sheet. Okay, we have the material as this, total material, total labor cost, factory overhead as this, administrative overhead. Please remember this administrative overhead is talking about related to production. This is very important, huh? You can add this in question that this administrative overhead is related to production. So that means after works cost, you can add this thing to find out the cost of production or cost of goods sold, right? So this is important, huh? This is not related to the general administration overhead. This is related to the production. Okay. It is estimated that 1000 in material and rupees 700 in labor will be required for one refrigerator. So you have been given the per unit labor cost and per unit material cost as well. Okay. You have to absorb the factory overhead on the basis of labor. Easy enough. On the basis of labor, you have to absorb the factory overhead. That means whatever is the percentage of factory overhead with regard to the labor, that will be applied for the per unit overhead, right? And administrative overhead will be absorbed on the basis of works cost. Okay, when we are preparing when we will prepare the cost sheet, you will understand what is written here. Okay, and a profit of 12.5% on the selling price is required. See, you don't need to see the question. just need to understand that you have to prepare the cost sheet, because whatever is the question that will be find out that will be found out by the help of cost sheet, right? So you need to prepare the cost statement or cost sheet here, then all the answers you will be able to give, right? So let's understand how we are going to prepare cost sheet for this particular question. Please understand and please listen to me very carefully in this slide also. Once this lecture is complete, you need to go through this lecture 2 or 3 times to have a better understanding, because this lecture was something very important and very dynamic as well. Because see, this is a foundation you need to have, and for any new subject, a student might get afraid of it. So for that, and if you don't want to get afraid of costing, you need to revisit this lecture again and again to have a better understanding and have a better clarity of the basic foundation of this chapter, right? Now let's understand what is statement of cost. See, we have a material of 3,50,000. Okay, you will write 3,50,000 for the materials. Now you will have labor cost as 2,70,000. You would write 2,70,000 as labor total cost. Okay, and you are going to add it, so you will have your prime cost. Remember, we done the cost sheet. After adding this, we get our prime cost, though we also had direct expenses, but we don't have direct expenses in this particular question, so we get prime cost by adding material and labor as well, right? Now comes the factory overhead. Factory overhead is how much? 56,080, isn't it? So here is your, no, okay, there is a misprinting. Okay, no, factory overhead is 81,000, administrative overhead is 56,080. So factory overhead is 81,000. Okay, so this is your factory overhead. Now I told you this thing, isn't it, that when you add factory overhead to the prime cost, what you get? You get your works cost. Though there were a concept of gross works cost, net works cost, but I have told you that important one is works cost. Then we have the costs of production, isn't it? So when you add this factory overhead, then we get our works cost. Now after works cost, remember what do we add? We add administrative overhead related to production, isn't it? So this is administrative overhead related to production, that is 56,080. Now this is 56,080. Now you will total it, you will get your cost of production. And finished goods, opening stock and closing stock is not given. Therefore in this question, this total cost of production is also equal to COGS, that is cost of goods sold, because opening stock and closing stock is not given to you. Now comes the very important point. It says absorb factory overhead on the basis of labor. What do we mean? What do we mean by this? Absorb factory overhead on the basis of labor. Please listen to me very carefully. See, you have factory overhead as 81,000. You have to absorb this. You have to recover this from units on the basis of labor. On the basis of labor. So 81,000 is what percentage of your total labor? This is what you have to calculate, right? So when you calculate it, factory overhead divided by labor multiplied by 100, obviously to calculate percentage, you get 30%. That means per unit administrative overhead, when you are going to calculate per unit administrative overhead, please listen to me very carefully, huh? Not administrative overhead, factory overhead. When you are going to calculate per unit factory overhead, then how you are going to calculate this? You are going to do 30%. 30% of what? Labor, per unit labor, because the percentage comes out to be 30%. Total factory overhead is 30% of total labor. What do we mean by this? That means per unit factory overhead will be 30% of per unit labor. Are you getting this thing? This is the meaning of the sentence. It will be absorbed on the basis of labor, right? So we have calculated the percentage, and when we have to calculate the per unit factory overhead, how would you do? You would calculate 30% of per unit labor. Don't worry, we are going to do that as well. First understand this concept. Now second sentence is administrative overhead on the basis of works cost. This is also very easy. In the numerator, you are going to write administrative overhead, and it is going to be absorbed on the basis of works cost. What is the total works cost? It is your 7,01,000 here, right? So in the denominator 7,01,000, in the numerator it is 56,080, then 8%. That means when you need to calculate this administrative overhead per unit administrative overhead, when you are going to calculate, you are going to do 8% of per unit works cost. This is what is meant by this sentence, isn't it? Now, let's find out the per unit selling price, per unit cost as well. So you have been given per unit material, that is 1000, isn't it? Yeah, and also labor is given to you as 700. Okay. Now you have the per unit prime cost as 1700. Now what I have told you in the previous table, that when you have to calculate the factory overheads per unit, you are going to do 30% of per unit labor. So that means when you calculate 30% of this 700, 30% of 700, you are going to get your 210. Then you will have your works cost. Now comes the another important part, that is administrative overhead per unit. How you are going to calculate? Administrative overhead is 8% of works cost. That means 8% of per unit works cost. That means this works cost is 1910, and when you are going to calculate 8% of it, you are going to have your administrative overhead per unit. Isn't it interesting now? Watch it twice and thrice, okay? Okay. So total cost of production you will have 2062. Now comes the last part of the question, that says a profit of 12.5% on the selling price is required. Now how will you do? I'll tell you how. You will have the total production cost at 2062. Let's suppose your profit is X, right? It says that 12.5% on the selling price, and your selling price will be 2062 plus X, isn't it? So question says that this X, when you divide this X by what? Selling price, because it says profit of 12.5% on the selling price. So profit with respect to selling price, that is 2062 plus X. When you do this in percentage, you will have your profit of 12.5%. 12.5 na? Yes, 12.5%. You don't write percent here because you have already multiplied 100 here. Okay. So when you solve this now, when you solve this equation, the value of X you are going to get is 294.69, right? So that's how you calculate this profit, and when you will add it, you will have your selling price. Ignore this, huh? You can do by this method also, but I have told you the conventional method because these shortcuts, sometimes students might face difficulty to understand this shortcut. So I have told you by the conventional mathematics. When you consider it X, when you add these two, you will obviously get your selling price, right? And you have been given the percentage. So you will find out by this method and you will have your X. Okay. Now comes the question. Question says, what is the percentage of factory overheads to the labor? We have found out this very easily. That is 30%. So the answer of this question is 30%, right? Question number 13 says, what is the percentage of administrative overhead to works cost? We have already found out this 8%. So answer is 8%. Yeah, where is this? 8%. Okay. Next question says, what is the selling price of the refrigerator? We have already calculated this, 2357.49. So the answer would be 2357.49. That is option number D. See, you have to do this numerical yourself, huh? Just because I have taught you, just because we have discussed, doesn't mean that you know this numerical. You need to practice this numerical by yourself to find out the total cost as well, and to find out the cost per unit as well, to have a better clarity that how to find out the cost, right? Okay, now we have the homework question that you have to comment on the comment section. And in the previous two classes plus in this class, if you have internalized any concept related to the costing, then please write thank you, because it motivates me to bring further lecture to build your concept, right? Write the answer of this homework question and write thank you as well. Okay, what is the question here? Which of the following statement is correct? You have to tell me, right? So you have to comment the answer of this question and plus thank you if I helped you in understanding any concept regarding 6 topics we have discussed. And these 6 topics, trust me, I'm telling you, these 6 topics are very important, and this is going to act as a base for your costing. Now you're almost, you can say almost 40 to 50% costing is finished in the 3 class itself, right? So I need comment. Okay, so that's all for today's class. Thank you for attending this. We are going to meet in the next lecture. Tab tak ke liye tata, bye bye.